Hi everyone, welcome to the EXL LifePRO DataMart and Analytics webinar, and thank you for joining us. My name is Greg Wheeler, and I'll be the moderator for today's discussion. Before we jump into the presentation, I just wanted to go over a few housekeeping items with you. During the presentation, you might have noticed that you will be in listen-only mode. We will be recording today's webinar and we'll make it available on the EXL website. And although you're muted, we do encourage you to ask questions throughout today's presentation, and you can do so by using the chat window located on the right side of your screen. Just type in your question. You can select the organizers and panelists. It should default to that. And just type in your question and hit send. And we'll see if we can answer those questions at the end of today's session. And if you encounter any technical difficulties, you can do the same thing. Just put in your points in the chat window and send them over, and we'll see if we can troubleshoot those. All right, very good. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Nick. We'll do introductions from left to right. Nick, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Nick Spradlin. I'm a service manager for the Cincinnati insurance companies. I basically have responsibility for our life applications and systems. So that includes LifePRO, that includes the DataMart product, which we're gonna kind of talk about today, and as well as some other ancillary applications related to new business and claims and things of that nature. So I look forward to sharing our experiences of the DataMart with all of you. Brian?
Thanks, Nick. I'm Brian Abraham. I'm the Chief Architect for the LifePRO platform, and I'm also the product owner for the DataMart. Really excited to present the DataMart product to all of you today. I'd like to show you how, I'm looking forward to showing you how useful the product can be and how it can help you avoid or minimize future LifePRO upgrade and maintenance efforts. Over to you, Eric.
Okay, hi, I'm Eric Thompson. I'm a technical services consultant here at EXL and have been the technical lead for the LifePRO DataMart. In that role, I've been the designer for the product and its features since its original build. And I look forward to telling you more about it. Thanks. Mahesh?
Thanks, Eric. Hello, everyone. My name is Mahesh Goswami. I work as a solution architect for EXL LifePRO and DataMart technical lead for the last 2 years. I have more than 13 years of experience in consultancy, solution design, and leading IT projects. Greg?
Thank you, Mahesh. So I'm Greg Wheeler. I've been working with insurance companies to find the right solutions for the past 16 years now, from investment systems to policy administration systems to analytical tools. So we're excited to show you how the DataMart can help you out. Today's agenda is to go through these points here. So we already touched on introduction, so we can go ahead and dive right in. Define what the DataMart is, how it can be valuable to me from a customer perspective from Nick, and then why is it needed and why now? And we'll also take you through some of the most recent evolution of the DataMart. And then again, we'll end the session with questions and answers, and I will be collecting those as we go. So feel free to ask questions throughout. And with that, I will go ahead and hand it over to Eric to define the DataMart.
Okay, thanks, Greg. So in this section today, like Greg mentioned in the agenda, we will answer the question, what is the DataMart? But in doing that, we'll answer a few more questions, starting with what is the DataMart? Then we'll talk about what does it do, where is it located, and finally, how is it loaded? So what is the DataMart? Essentially, it's a simplified data warehouse. We take that key operational data from LifePRO and store it in a relational and normalized format. Then from LifePRO, we extract data from more than 100 tables and store it in the DataMart in a hybrid snowflake format of dimension and fact tables. This provides for fast and easy access of both current and historical data, and it's all based on a Microsoft SQL Server platform. The product supports storage of data from multiple LifePRO sources. So if you're a current client who has multiple LifePRO databases, or if in the future you have need for adding another production LifePRO instance, the DataMart will be there to support that. So we can move on to the next slide, Greg. What does the DataMart do? So this slide in many ways is going to act as a preview for some of the deeper discussions we do later in the session. But first of all, it stores data in a standard, stable, relational format. And then from there, it acts as an integration platform that provides a consolidated view of the LifePRO data. And that refers back to that multiple LifePRO data sources that it can hold, but also because it's a SQL Server database, it can incorporate other sources in the future, such as LDS, or if you as a client have your own data sources you want to kind of club together with LifePRO data. And as that integration platform that is standard and stable, this creates that predictable barrier between LifePRO and your reporting and interface solutions. And this is a point that Brian and others are going to dive deeper on later around the topic of upgrade. In that role as an integration platform, to give you confidence in that role, we have a series of product features that around restart capability, exception reporting, and validation utility that are there to ensure stability and accuracy. And Mahesh is going to dive a little bit deeper on those topics. Beyond the initial usage of the DataMart that we talked about, it plays a role in BI or business intelligence analysis and decision support. And this is, again, another point that Brian will dive deeper on later. So we can move on to the next slide. In this, what types of data are included? This graphic depicts various groups and sub-details of the data contained in LifePRO, today. In the original build of the product, we included data that we considered to be popular for interface and reporting: policy, benefit, name and address, agent. And then as clients came on board, we would collaborate with them on a gap analysis between this build of the DataMart and the client's interfacing and reporting demand. That working with clients, that resulted in an expansion of the tables and fields. Examples would be claim, reinsurance, and group that have subsequently been added. And that process continues through to today, additional fields being added in version 20. Okay. Where does the DataMart reside? We can go on to the next slide. So as a database, and within the context of the LifePRO ecosystem, a chart that, as you've been in LifePRO presentations before, you may have seen, the DataMart sits right next to the LifePRO database, and it plays a role within the shared functionality. So Greg, you can go on to the next slide. Within the context of LifePRO daily processing, the top portion of the slide shows the daily and nightly processing that you engage in today, the online user activity, and then the nightly LifePRO processing batch cycles. The bottom portion then shows how the DataMart feeds off of this current process at the point of end-of-day business results. A key point in this architecture, and I hope it kind of jumps out to you when I say it now, is that this does not impact LifePRO availability. If you're someone who's striving towards 24/7 operations, the DataMart does not affect that. We're able to feed off of that post-cycle backup, and then entirely parallel process engages for the DataMart that would then allow you immediately to open up your LifePRO instance to online users again if your operation demanded that. The bottom portion also depicts where the ETL fits, the loading process fits within this daily process. And this poses the question, how is the DataMart loaded? And there's where I'll hand it off to Mahesh to describe that further.
Thanks, Eric. Next, I'm going to talk about how the DataMart is loaded, and then we will talk about some of the DataMart features. So the data load to DataMart is a simple three-step process. We extract it, we transform it, and we then load it. So we extract the LifePRO source databases, which, by the way, can be more than one if you are running on multiple environments. We use the activities and we capture the activities using triggers and then store the activities to trigger lock tables. The extracted information is first stored to DataMart staging or work tables for efficiency. Then, running a series of transformation, the data is loaded to DataMart destination tables, which is fact and dim in the diagram. Then we have reference tables, which basically have all the copybook information like option codes, record type descriptions. They are loaded one time with the initial load. So the simple and well-documented data flow allows easy adaptability by the operations team. Nick, if you can move to the next slide, Greg. Next, we will talk about the DataMart features. So as you see in the diagram, we have added multiple new features. So the DataMart is now easy to use, performant, resilient, reliable, and most importantly, accurate. Now you don't have to worry about verifying data accuracy, as DataMart comes with a validation utility to ensure that the data we ETL in the DataMart is always equal to LifePRO. And all that is summarized to few target tables, so we don't have to go and look into 100+ tables for data accuracy. With the addition of restart capability and rollback, now you don't have to worry about the ETL events. The operations teams can either decide to continue from the point of failure after the issue is fixed, or in case required, can roll back and start over. Next, one of the major reasons for the data load to fail is data anomalies. And we have observed in some cases with LifePRO date fields and broken linkages. Good news is we can now identify these well before the process and then route them to the exceptions table for easy business awareness and also prevent breaking ETLs. You will also experience an ease in the use of new DataMart version with extensive documentation, logging that we have put on various functionalities, the ETL performance improvements that has been done, and the availability of upgraded code utility. This new code utility now is multi-threaded for performance, and then it uses REST services to generate codes such as surrender. We can generate loans, balance inquiries, RMDs, and then death benefits. So I think that's pretty much covers what we have as in new features in the DataMart. And since now that we have answered what is the DataMart question, I'll invite Nick to hear from him how the Cincinnati Insurance is using DataMart. Nick, over to you.
Thank you, Mahesh. So you may be asking yourself as customers, how can a customer utilize the DataMart and how can I benefit from it? And I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about how Cincinnati has benefited from it. And I think to do that, I'm going to focus on three key areas. One is how it is simplified or upgrades. The second is how we can do more with less, and I'll describe that in a second. And the final is how this is now the data source for all of our needs, both now and in the future. So I think it's important to kind of look back in time at what used to happen when you did an upgrade before the DataMart, before the DataMart was in play. At Cincinnati, we would upgrade the base software, so we'd put our custom code in place. Then we would have to do all the code around the interfaces. So if a table changed within LifePRO or they moved data around, we would have to update the COBOL program to basically pull that data out, because again, it's usually in copybooks. It may have been binary. It wasn't easy to get to that data. Then we'd have to retest everything. We'd usually have to do heavy retesting, not only that we didn't screw up the feed, but that the feed still worked and operated in the way we needed to deliver it to, whether it's another system, another vendor, whatever that turned out to be. So what we've seen from the DataMart is it's offered us consistency with our upgrades. Instead of doing all that work, we migrated our feeds to come off the DataMart, and now all we're doing is testing our interfaces. And the reason we're able to do that is because of the promise EXL is made around the DataMart, in that if they change the core structure of the LifePRO tables, they will not change the core structure of the DataMart tables. So the fact and dim tables will remain constant. You may see new tables appear. You may see additional columns added to tables. But if you're just interested in 5 fields on one table in the DataMart, those 5 fields are always going to be in the same place. So if you build a feed off those 5 fields or a report off those 5 fields, you don't have to rewrite it. So all you got to do is smoke test it. So that's what I think one of the biggest benefits we've seen is it's been able to simplify our upgrades and the interfaces that we've written over time. So the second thing I want to talk about is how it allows us to do more with less. And I think knowing that the data now isn't in binary, it's in a relational database, you don't necessarily need a developer to write a program. So before, every time you wanted to get at data in LifePRO, even if it was simple things such as a policy count or how many policies had a claim on them, you would have to get a programmer involved to write that query. What we've been able to do in our experience in Cincinnati is we've been able to give the business users access to the DataMart basically to run their own reports. So we've provided them training basically on how to write those queries. We've also have our non-tech staff, so people that aren't developers that are in IT, they're also able to do that work. And the reason we're able to do that is because of that data dictionary EXL provides. So that data dictionary not only tells us, what each element is in the DataMart, but it also tells it how it maps back to the LifePRO database. So what we've done is we've given those associates, as non-developing associates, access to that data dictionary. So if they want to know where a piece of data is at, they can look it up online. So that's really helped a lot with reports. So stuff that used to take weeks to turn around because a programmer would have to get involved, write a query to pull the data out, and then send the results to the customer. The customer can either now do that themselves, or if we have to have a programmer involved, it can be turned around in hours, because again, it's just a simple SQL query. So it's allowed us to take our developers who used to spend a lot of time doing ad hoc reports for management, and it's allowed us to focus them on more technical tasks. So, developing new applications, developing new interfaces, things that are a better use of their time than just going out and pulling, a small set of data out for, a question. So the final thing I'll talk about is how the DataMart has become a data source for kind of all of our needs now and in the future. So one of the things the DataMart offers is consistency. So that consistency and upgrade. So like most companies, we have an enterprise data warehouse. Our life company is part of a bigger property and casualty company. We're one of the subsidiaries under it. So all of the subsidiaries feed data up to a data warehouse, an enterprise data warehouse. What we've been able to do is, if we choose to, which we haven't decided which direction we're going to go yet, but we can write an ETL off the DataMart to basically feed that warehouse. So when we upgrade LifePRO down the road, we don't have to worry about fixing the feed to the data warehouse. We do it once and we're done. Because again, that DataMart database is going to be consistent. The only thing we really have to worry about is if new tables and new columns are added, that we also want to push to that data warehouse. So again, it saves us time by not needing to redo all that work over and over again. We also use it a lot for connections to other applications. So if other applications need data from LifePRO, we actually use the DataMart as the source. Again, because it's easy to get at, and it's another thing we don't have to retest when we upgrade. And as I talked about earlier, you know, our actuarial staff who we've given access to, you know, the DataMart database, they're able to write their own reports for management instead of coming to IT and asking for us to pull that data out. So in summary, why did we implement the DataMart? We did it for a couple reasons. One is, you know, it makes our upgrades easier because we don't have to retest everything like we used to. Our reporting is a lot better, so we're able to turn around things a lot quicker than we used to be able to. You know, our uptime has improved, which I really didn't touch on a lot, but you know, it's kind of to the point now where our uptime is as soon as the LifePRO cycle is done, because all of our interfaces run off the DataMart, we're able to turn LifePRO back on to our users immediately. So, you know, it's a good problem to have. I mean, if people wanted to get on late at night, they could get on and get into LifePRO. They don't have to necessarily wait anymore for all those other subsidiary feeds to run that could be impacted by someone transacting business. And finally, I think the one powerful thing EXL has provided with the DataMart is that data dictionary. You know, going through that exercise of mapping the base LifePRO database to the DataMart database. So if people are familiar with the structure of the LifePRO database and where things are at, they can use that data dictionary to very easily find it in the DataMart. So I think those are some of the reasons Cincinnati implemented. I feel like it's been a very successful implementation for us. And I think it's helped us a lot, you know, save time on upgrades and save money over time and not having to have as much development staff as we necessarily would have had to do everything we've done. With that, I'll turn it over to Brian Abraham to go on to the next part.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks for that introduction. So, like, what are the most important reasons why you'd want to implement the DataMart now? You know, I think it really comes down to are you planning a LifePRO upgrade in the near future? Because this basically pays for itself. We've noticed with not just Cincinnati Life but other clients that while they're going through this upgrade, if they've already transitioned many of their integrations to the DataMart, they see huge or significant improvements in testing, you know, avoiding a lot of that effort during the testing process, and they're able to translate that into doing upgrades faster and implementing faster the new version of LifePRO. I would like to point out the one observation that Nick made earlier about the data dictionary. That data dictionary is actually available to you today if you go onto Remedy Force, and you can go out there and you can list all the fields that are in the LifePRO database. And there's one report you just need to generate that says here's every field in the excuse me, the DataMart database, and excuse me, where it maps directly to the LifePRO database. So it's a very useful report. It puts it in Excel format. So you can do that today. You don't have to wait for the DataMart, but that'll show you a lot of the fields that are in the DataMart and will help you in your analysis. So, you know, one of the other features that we've noticed with the DataMart, and one of the reasons why we see it extremely beneficial for our clients, is that you know, it identifies every data anomaly in your database and any incorrect relationships. So with the features that we have today, if you were to implement the DataMart, it'll come back and it's going to tell you, hey, here's a bunch of orphaned agent records, or here's orphaned policy records, or here's codes and option things that maybe you've done conversions to LifePRO in the past, and maybe you didn't get it perfect the first time you did it, or maybe you put a few option codes in there that don't normally exist. The DataMart finds those things. It reports them back, it puts them in a table, and it allows you to go and investigate why. So, you know, from a you know, auditing point of view, the DataMart is almost a requirement for most clients, because you need to be able to report back, you know, on a conversion. Here's maybe links that were broken, et cetera, et cetera. I think one of the big things that Nick brought up is the fact that at Cincinnati Life, they've reduced a lot of their technology debt. Not only they use the DataMart to give them some testing productivity, but it's that reducing technology debt that's so important. Some of you have many customizations in LifePRO. When I say many, I don't mean like 10 or 20, I mean 100, 200, 500. And if you start looking at how many of those integrations are done to create output for other systems, or how many are being used for transferring data between one system and another, or your data to your data warehouse, the more that you integrate those directly with the LifePRO database, the more technical debt you're creating for yourself. So that makes upgrades much harder for you. If you were to direct them at the DataMart, such as Cincinnati Life has done, then it becomes a much simpler task to test those. And in fact, most of the maintenance is not in your ballpark anymore. It becomes an EXL issue as we go from release to release in LifePRO to make sure that any table changes are upgraded in our ETL. So we end up maintaining that for you. So it's a great way of leveraging your maintenance contracts and your maintenance and support. Let's go on to the next slide. Some other areas which you're definitely going to benefit with, integrate from a reporting standpoint. Nick mentioned that in his case, he's doing more with less. He's able to take more of the power user or people that can understand SQL, transact SQL queries, and he's able to roll out the data directly to the people that want it. I can't relate to you how many times in the past, over the many years I've been with LifePRO, where clients have, I've been on client sites and they've said, oh, I just need a simple list of policies by state with line of business and product, okay? And I need to provide that for an audit, for an auditor. And if they just had access to the data and had either a standard view that was created or just a standard query that was given them, they wouldn't need to ask an IT person to come up with a report for them. And obviously, all those requests become large queues, and you start ending up having a shortage of IT people. So in this case, giving more power to the end user is a significant benefit to at least to any organization. But I also want to take that a little bit step further. Take a look at business intelligence tools that we have today. Those business intelligence tools are basically designed to go and connect to a relational database, understand the relationships in that database, and give you drag and drop capability to be able to create your own reports. So take a look at a tool such that everybody can use out of the box called Power BI, for example. You could take that tool, directly connect it to a LifePRO database, and start letting your users drag and drop and figuring out their own reports. And you don't have to have an IT person necessarily standing there beside them. And then you can roll out those reports if you really wanted to, if you wanted to design your own. So the DataMart is the very first step in doing more advanced BI capabilities and not having to write a lot of really technical IT-based reports for management. So you should be looking at it from that perspective as well. And I think, if we want to take that one step further, and you talk about most clients are now moving into the analytics realm and trying to understand, where have we been and where are we going? The DataMart is what we would call analytics step one. You have to have your data available in order to be able to do any type of analysis on that data. And a lot of times, that's half the battle, is trying to put that data in a place that is reliable, dependable, and accurately depicts what your history's been and where you've been. Go to the next slide, please. And when we talk, let's talk about analytics just for a brief moment. There are various stages of being analytics aware in your organization. The first one is when you're in the descriptive stage. What happened? What happened in the last year? How many policies did I sell in the last year? How many policies did I sell in the last week or month? And when you look at that, it's really hindsight. What have we done? But the next stage, in order to be able to do that, you have to make sure your data is reliable and dependable. So there's where the DataMart comes in, because half that battle is trying to gather all the data sources or the data from various different sources and be able to predict it from one place. So the DataMart handles multiple versions of LifePRO, for example. So before you might have had to go and say, over my so many instances of LifePRO, how well did I do from a from a business point of view. And today, with the DataMart, those could all be brought into one DataMart database, and you can do the queries directly and say, over all of my LifePRO databases, here's what I did last week. If you have multiple instances, that's a very tough query to do today if you don't have the DataMart. Now, when we take the analytics journey a little bit farther, we talk about predictive analytics, and what's happening now. What are the key factors in my data, key performance indicators that tell me or predict that I'm going to do a sale? Is it gender? Is it age? Is it state? Is it product type? Is it key features in the product? Those are the types of things you need to have the data all organized in order to look at. And then finally, taking it that one step forward, now I want to predict future sales. I want to be able to say, hey, when somebody's on the line talking to my CSR, I want to have flagged them as somebody that would have been interested in my new product I'm releasing next week, and I want to talk to them about it so I can get them on that new product. Or if it's a product that's got a high, like a very low retention rate or a high, a cancellation rate, I want to talk to that person right now, and I want to convert them onto a different type of policy. So you can be much more proactive. But everybody wants to be there. But in order to get to that stage, you have to start at the beginning. Next slide, please. So here's where it really sort of comes together on how do I get to that stage where I can do some predictive analytics, and it all starts in step one, the infrastructure to deploy analytics solutions and environments. So in this case, you'll see that the LifePRO DataMart fits in that scenario. It's gathering all your data. I was told by our analytics department in most of their engagements, half of the effort they spend is trying to get all the data together so that they can analyze it correctly. So the DataMart does that in one step. So if you're trying to go down this route now where you want to become more advanced go to that more predictive stage where you can start predicting sales, step one is implementing the DataMart. Okay, next slide. Okay, I'd like to now turn it over to Eric to talk about our evolution and how you as a client could become involved in the DataMart and new features and things we add in the future. Eric?
So thanks, Brian. So in terms of DataMart evolution, just want to describe where we were, where we are, and where we're going type story, and then where you are involved in that, and as a DataMart client. So we have the current version of LifePRO, and we've described some features that it has, that current version has, and between parallel processing, that normalized schema, multi-database support, etc. And we've talked about the versions, the features that we've added. Mahesh dove deep on those, and that's really that V19 SP5 version of DataMart that we have. And the big note here is, as a client who's on V19 anywhere up through Service Pack 5, this version of the DataMart is available to you, and it's supported through that spectrum of base through SP5. And then we have our future availability here between SP6 and V20, and in those cases we're going to kind of pace a little bit behind the LifePRO general availability. In SP6's case, we're a little bit of an expansion there in terms of what we have to react to under that keeping pace with the LifePRO version, in that just a few agent tables to add or not add, excuse me, but to modify our ETL to adjust and continue to supply that information in that consistent format. When we reach V20, if you've been involved in any of those discussions, there's a pretty big technical leap that's being made in terms of the LifePRO database, normalizing a lot of the tables inside that database. So ETL side, we have some work to do. We're reacting to that and taking care of all that so we can, again, supply that, view of that information in that consistent format. The one point there is we are pulling back into base some additional tables that have been done on a per client basis up to that point, and those will become generally available at that time. When we talked about some of the enhancements and improvements that we've made to the product along the way, this is where your involvement comes in. And around this time of last year, we started up the DataMart working group, and this really parallels the working group, architecture working group that the LifePRO product has, and that Brian leads. And this is a way for you to be involved and us to really get some ideas maybe that we have in front of you before design starts, but also get ideas that you have as people who are using this they're wanting to use it in a demand to meet your demand. There may be practices and different things that you do as an organization that you want to incorporate into the product, and this architecture working group is the way to go about that. So let me slide over to the next slide then, Greg, I'll have you segue into that. And so this group is your opportunity to gather with other clients and the LifePRO technical folks and really hash out the changes that are going to be made, or we'd like to propose to make to the product. It's really an early conversation we're having. At this point in time, the things we're going to talk about in this meeting, EXL hasn't started to put pen on paper yet. We haven't designed them. We haven't started building anything. But we want everybody's input so that when you as a client are able to drive and help drive the direction that the improvement is going to take. A lot of the details that are shown in this slide are consistent with the LifePRO group. We have a page that we reference, and we meet monthly to have this conversation. So let's go to the next slide, Greg. And in those conversations, like I mentioned, on the left are some of the things we have talked about and implemented, and some future things that you can look forward to talking about are improvements to how we install and how we execute the product and the ETL. It's frequent daily updates, like I mentioned earlier in the webinar here, that right now we supply end of business day results in the DataMart, and then those results are when they're finalized into the DataMart, those are available to you in that state throughout the day. This discussion is going to say how can we more frequently update those during the day, so that if you have demands that need more frequent updates, we'll be able to supply that, and we can start that discussion here. Other things are version upgrades. How can we do those more efficiently and implement those into your organization more smoothly? Data expansion, that's a constant conversation that I referenced earlier. Some more data type items where we want to de-identify data, and then bringing on other data like LDS is something we'll be talking about also. So this is we would definitely, as you take on the product, we'll look forward to working with you in this forum. So that's what I had, and back to you, Greg.
Greg, I think you're on mute.
Mute, yeah.
Sorry about that. A little technical difficulty on my end. So, all right, well, great. Thank you, guys. We had a chance to hear what the DataMart is and how it can be beneficial to you. We heard from Nick's perspective on how the DataMart can save time and empower the user. We talked about why the DataMart is instrumental in your path to predictive analytics, and how your involvement is important to our future evolution of DataMart. So we didn't have any questions that came in, and we are towards the end of our session here, so we can certainly give some time back to you folks. If there's any information or thoughts that came up from the panelists during our presentation. If you'd like to elaborate on any points, feel free to do so now. Otherwise, we can probably go ahead and end the session. Anything that you guys would like to elaborate on?
I did have one thing that as I was mentioning the DataMart evolution, that as I jumped a little bit forward quickly, I wanted to mention that as we talk about LifePRO upgrades, that the pattern we're trying to follow is to have is a quick follow with the DataMart upgrade. So when general availability occurs for a given LifePRO version, DataMart would follow around 6 weeks later. As a quick follow, as we are, code freezes and different things happen, then it would be a 6-week lag before DataMart becomes available. So I did want to mention that.
Great. Okay. Well, we did record today's session. We will make it available on the website. We will distribute a PDF version of today's presentation to you all who joined. And we'd like to thank you for joining us for the DataMart webinar. If you have any questions, of course, after the session that come to mind, feel free to email us. And, just here's some information for Tom Organ's email address too, if you'd like to express any interest in moving further with your DataMart plans. So with that, I'll go ahead and wrap it up, and I'd like to thank you all again for joining today's session, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Good session. Thank you very much.